I Mean You No Harm by Beth CastrodaleIn. This character-driven mystery thriller, Layla, the struggling artist who has recently been let go from her day job, is processing the death of her father, who had committed crimes, which brings up new questions about her mother's death. It had been assumed that Layla's mother died by suicide, but now she isn't so sure. In an attempt to reconcile the tragedies of her family, she takes a road trip with her half-sister Bette from Ohio to Arizona. Through those long miles, the two women uncover parts of their past and move toward reconciling their troubled relationship. Castrodale's novel is a slow burn, but ultimately a very satisfying one. Daryl by Jackie is living off his modest inheritance in Eugene, Oregon. Daryl takes psychedelics to cope, in part, with his half-open relationship. While Daryl proclaims to enjoy being a cuckold, it's also clear that he has little to say and less consent about how his marriage operates. It's also clear that he has no idea how toxic he is to other people. Written almost as a confessional, this novel from Jackie captures the fear and anxiety of a certain kind of man, cis, mullet, white, and lays it bare. What's so engaging is not the sex nor the drugs in the plot, but the way that it harnesses the conversational style of the internet to tell Daryl's story in a way that is both electric and insightful. You'll Be Fine by Jen Michalski. Alex Mass has worked hard to leave her small Maryland town behind to make it as a writer in Washington. When her mother dies, Alex returns to her childhood home and complicates the trip by pitching a story to her DC editor about a local chef, who just happens to be Alex's ex-girlfriend from high school who hasn't come out. While sorting through the unresolved feelings she has for her ex, she meets another woman in her hometown with whom she has instant chemistry. Alex asks the familiar coming-of-age questions about family, love, and what the past means for the future, but You'll Be Fine is a thoroughly modern take on this genre. Insightful detail paired with Michalski's signature ability to tell family stories makes this novel shine. Grandmothers on Guard, Gender, Aging, and Minutemen at the US-Mexico Border by Jennifer L. Johnston. A scholarly book that reads like watching a fast-paced documentary. Grandmothers on Guard is an investigation into the older woman, many of them literal grandmothers, who have stationed themselves at the US-Mexico border as part of the ongoing vigilante effort to police immigration. What Johnston discovers is that the motivations of women who are part of the Minutemen and similar groups is less rooted in seeking out violent conflict than their male counterparts. These women are seeking relevance. In a society that genders even aging, however misguided the work is, it is a way for them to be less invisible. A professor of Latino studies, Johnston brings a wealth of knowledge of border politics and context to this fascinating book. Paper Concert, a conversation in the round by Amy Wright. Wright intersperses excerpted interviews with other writers with her own essays, which thread the collection together. It's particularly interesting to read different responses to the same query, like, when have you felt the freest? Paper Concert is an invitation to slow down and consider complicated questions for which there are no absolute answers. Grievers by Adrienne Marie Brown. A mysterious illness is gripping Detroit, and June's mother is patient zero. It's unclear to authorities if it is a pandemic, an epidemic, a virus, or a fungus, but the condition tears through Black communities. Even though people are leaving the city, including her former lover, Marta, June stays on, caring for her older grandmother and inhabiting the home where she was raised. Across the city, people keep dying and June becomes a cartographer of loss, taking notes and collecting stories, while at the same time learning how to survive. The daughter of a researcher and an activist, June forges forward, even when confronted with terrible realities. This is a story of how our history shapes us, the hurt and the love and all the painful and joyful parts in between. A Girl Called Rumi by Ariana Ba. As a child caught in the aftermath of the 1979 Iranian Revolution, Kimia clashed with teachers, her family, and against the social restrictions on girls and women. Now an adult, Kimia has since moved to San Diego, where despite the unresolved trauma of her past and struggles with self-harm, she becomes a successful life coach. When she returns to Iran with her mother, Kimia is caught in a collision of memory and the present. A beautifully layered own voices novel. Riots, stories by Savannah. Johnston. In rural Oklahoma, the indigenous characters in Riots are trying to circumvent poverty, incarceration, and addiction. A boy cuts his father's fractured foot free from a boot, and some days later, the man dies. A relationship that might have been a romance ends at the same time the dope runs out. A 12-year-old girl attends her father's funeral, while her uncle smokes pot outside. Johnston's stories humanize the hardscrabble and illuminate the resiliency of her characters as they work through what it means to have and to lose family. Johnston writes with shattering clarity, and writes is riveting from beginning to end. The Hubris of an Empty Hand by Mario Muzakova. Expansive stories in The Hubris of an Empty Hand explore both the ordinary and the magical. A man named Stock receives a divine gift in the title story. The same man in a different story finds himself stranded on a liminal plane between life and death. Characters and places, like a restaurant called Spinter, recur throughout this collection, giving the philosophical components of this book an anchor. A contemplative exploration of both inner and external lives. Strange Folk You'll Never Meet by O. Velasquez. The stories in Strange Folk You'll Never Meet are short, many just 3 to 4 pages long, but each one is viscerally resonant. There's a sense of the corporeal in these retellings of fairy tales and unusual perspectives of historical figures, with many of the stories linking back to ideas of the physical body. Both hunger and pregnancy have thematic roles, as does the sometimes violent nature of children. Written with a darkly sparkling lyricism, Velasquez's collection is gory, gorgeous, and like nothing else you'll read. Tales The Devil Told Me by Jen Fawkes.
Thank you for watching. Please subscribe